Hi everyone, welcome to part 4 in the series of creating scripted REST APIs in ServiceNow. When developing and testing APIs, you may have already seen the REST API Explorer in ServiceNow. But there is another tool which you may not know about. It's called Postman. It's not a ServiceNow application, but it is an extremely easy and powerful tool for testing APIs of all shapes and sizes. And I'm going to be using this throughout this series. There's a lot of documentation, including YouTube videos about how to use Postman and to get up to speed. So my intention is not to go through this with you in this video. There's plenty of other resources available, and I've included those in the description below. What I would like to do here though is just provide a quick demo so that you can start to familiarize yourself with this tool. With the REST API Explorer, we can go ahead and explore our different APIs. So we could actually come here right now and use the table API, which is the most common, most generic API that is available for most tables in your ServiceNow instance, and specify the vehicle table that we created and specify a simple query parameter to get the vehicle for a specific VIN, send that request, and then we can go ahead and see the response. But you'll notice that if you scroll up a little bit further, that request is actually executed every time as the currently logged in user, which doesn't really help us that much if we want to test our APIs with different integration users, and also if we want to test later different authentication methods such as OAuth and using authentication scopes. So what we can do is, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and copy the URI for this request, and we'll switch straight over to Postman. As I said before, Postman is an extremely flexible and powerful tool for testing your APIs. So we're not going to go into every single feature here by any means. But suffice to say that you can create your own workspaces, collections, define your own APIs, define environment variables that you can use for testing, and you can carry out automated tests as well. So at the moment, I've just got a workspace here called vehicles. I've got a collection called table API, and I'm going to go ahead right now and create a new request. So I'll give it a name, and then we can see we've got different HTTP methods that we can execute. So for our simple demonstration, I'm going to select get and then pop in that URI that I copied earlier. Again, it's executing or using the table API that we just saw in the REST API Explorer. So now we can just specify the same parameters here, okay, the syspalm query, and then provide the VIN. And if we go over to the authorization tab, we can see here there are many different authorization methods that you can use for this request. Again, for this simple and initial demonstration, we're just going to go with basic auth, which basically means we provide a username and password for a user that we have in our ServiceNow instance. But rather than hard coding these credentials here, you can reuse them and actually make them a little bit more secure by putting them over into variables. And so I can see how I've already gone ahead and predefined some variables in advance, and these variables are saved in this vehicles demo environment. And if we just click here, we can see here that we've got a whole series of variables that I've already defined that I'll be using later in this series. And you can see we've got ones for different user accounts, but also the one down the bottom there for VIN. So what we could actually do here, if we go back to our test here, we can actually change the hard-coded VIN value here and then just point it to the variable that we saw earlier, just by popping it in like that. And that's all we need to do. So if we go ahead and send that request, we get the same response back that we did in the REST API Explorer. So check out Postman if you haven't already. It's an extremely powerful tool for development and testing your APIs. And it also contains some features that the REST API Explorer doesn't have, such as testing different authentication methods. So later in this series, when we look at OAuth and authentication scopes, we're going to be using Postman to get our access tokens and to use those tokens to authenticate. So we're going to be using Postman for testing purposes mainly in this series, but we will also be using the automated testing framework in ServiceNow towards the end of the series, together with how we can also schedule and run automated tests in Postman. So In the next video, we are going to create our initial record for our web service, for our scripted REST API for our vehicles table. So stay tuned for that.